Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to see so many people that I know on the list of participants. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bigger challenge because I have to tell you stuff I haven't already talked about. Today we're talking about implementing professional learning communities, and we're going to specifically talk about it from an administrative perspective. So I set out some objectives for the webinar that I want to go over with you. I'm hoping to accomplish all of these, and hopefully at the end when we have question and answer time, you can let me know if we met the objectives. So first of all, you're going to learn about one school's, what I call a successful effort at least, at implementing professional learning communities. You're going to talk about ways to manage your time and resources for implementing PLCs and what it really takes to successfully implement PLCs.
And just quickly to add to that, as you go through the webinar today, at the end of the webinar, if you would like a certificate for your participation and attendance in this webinar, you can email me at cmoore@air.org to request a certificate at the conclusion of the webinar. And Nancy, we will turn this all over to you now.
Thanks, Cherise. Okay. So to go over some more specific objectives for the webinar, by the end of the webinar, you should be able to understand a possible framework for embedding collaborative professional development in your daily work and the daily work of your teachers, more importantly, to select an existing pattern at your school that, if altered, might begin to shift your culture in the direction of professional learning communities and collaborative work, and to identify at least 3 resources that will support successful implementation of professional learning communities. And I know at the end there are some handouts that you can download that will support some of this. So hopefully that will add to your bank of resources that will help support the work. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And what I wanted to do was begin by telling you a little bit of a story. I'm going to read you a story, so you're going to have to bear with me for a few minutes while I read you the story. But while I'm reading the story, I want you to think about whether any of this connects to your story. So, once upon a time in the suburbs of Oakland, there was a little struggling school. It was a good school with many dedicated and hardworking staff members. Each program at the school did a good job of serving students, and students were learning a myriad of things. The school struggled, however, with really knowing what exactly the students were learning. There were so many questions. Was learning consistent from one classroom to the next or one student to the next? Were the students learning the most important things? How could we even know for sure? Were the very limited resources being used in the most efficient and effective ways possible? Did isolated programs meet the changing and often overlapping needs of their complex students? How were they ever going to be a great school if they didn't know the answers to these very important questions? How could the fairy godmother, the director, ensure a happily ever after conclusion to this story? So one winter day in 2007, the school embarked on a quest into a thick wooded forest of inquiry, and this is how the story begins. So what I want to talk about first is just how we started off with a shift in our school climate. And I'm fairly sure that many of you are going to hear some similarities and things you can connect to in the story that I'm going to share with you. So this is kind of the details and the background of the fairy tale that I just read to you. We were a school that was really kind of stuck. And I'm not saying we were a bad school. We were doing a lot of really good things. but we were very entrenched in past practice, and we were feeling a bit like we were kind of stuck and not moving forward. And some of the patterns that you might recognize that told us that were things like our various program areas were isolated. We heard, you could hear a lot of talk among the programs about your program does this or that, or my program does this or that, and none of them were really referred to as our programs. Our program managers were making decisions that were really done in isolation without a lot of peer, student, or teacher input. Classroom teachers had a lot of autonomy in deciding what and how they taught, and the end result of that was really a lot of disparity for our students. The amount of speaking and listening in ESL classes really depended on the strength and the desire of the individual teachers. In Career Tech Ed, we had teachers who were really teaching to their specific skill, but there wasn't that common thread that went through the whole program that really connected one class to a next and provided those foundational standards and foundational skills that every student should be getting. Standards. I'm sure all of us cringe a little bit when we hear the term standards. We definitely taught new teachers all about standards. We did a lot with standards in training, but there wasn't really any connection, don't tell anybody, between the standards and what was happening in the classroom. We just weren't seeing those standards translated into what was happening in the classroom. And most of all, or worst of all, I'm not sure how to put it exactly, we did a lot of talking about teaching, but we didn't seem to talk very much about learning. And that began to kind of disturb a number of us here at the school, that maybe our focus really wasn't on the right thing. And so through our strategic planning process, which was kind of a nice opportunity that happened to come along through the district, we were able to really look at what we wanted to shift and how we wanted to shift it. Going through strategic planning really helped us to analyze our current status and to really get in touch with student needs. But in order to do that in a way that wasn't just more isolated decision-making and planning, not connected to anything, we really had to have broad representation of stakeholders involved in that. And so we went through a pretty intensive process that included classified staff, custodial staff, teaching staff, administrative staff. It included students from all different programs. It included community members, stakeholders, whether we had family members, we had some people from business, from the city, all participated in this pretty extensive strategic planning process. And the strategic planning really was built upon using data, which really helped with how stuck we were in past practice, because as you, I'm sure, can guess, everybody came to the strategic planning table with their own individual agendas about what they wanted to see kept or maintained. And by taking an approach of beginning with data, the focus became the data and the needs of the students, and those individual agendas kind of began to fall away. So the kind of data I'm talking about is enrollment data, demographic data, test scores, graduation and persistence rates. What were our facilities? What was our staffing? What was our budget? What was the curriculum we were using and the materials? What kind of statistics did we have for previous staff development? So when I say data, I'm not just talking about standardized test data. I'm talking about anything that gives you that qualitative and quantitative information to then work from. And most importantly was student feedback data. And we got that both through student surveys, but also through the students' participation in that strategic planning. So the end result for us was really pretty amazing, I think. As those student needs fell away, what we wound up with, as those individual agendas fell away and that focus on student needs came to the surface, what we wound up with was a vision and mission and objectives and teams that then began working on action plans that really were all connected back to the needs of the students. So that's just a kind of the background of where we started from, and this is what staged us to then work on really shifting the patterns at our schools to be better meeting the needs of the students. So thinking about patterns, and we talk here a lot about how patterns in our schools and our work environments are a lot like fractals. For those of you who are algebra buffs, you would know about fractals, but fractals are patterns that repeat infinitely. And so we really began to look at if there were things that we wanted to change, what was the pattern that existed across all areas of the school? And generally we would see if, for example, there was not enough input in decision making at the classroom level, that generally was reflective of a pattern of not enough input in decision making at the program level, at the school level. So those patterns really we saw reflecting themselves as fractals throughout the system. So what I want to do is have you think about what's one existing pattern at your school. I'm sorry, I started on question 2. Is there something in your school culture that needs to shift? And if you all could, I just pulled up a question box there where you can type in responses. Think about if there's something in your school culture that you feel like needs to begin to shift or change. And please type in your answer. Well, thank you very much. If you're still typing an answer, go ahead and finish that. I just want to address a few of these. As you look over the responses to that question, you'll see that there are some similarities, and what's amazing to me is to see how many of them exactly resonate with a lot of the things that we talked about. Communication, as we went into our strategic planning, was a huge issue that we really had to spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about. And as I touch on collaboration later, what we did with collaboration really addressed communication. Those Lone Ranger teachers who want to do their own thing regardless of curriculum and student needs, accountability for outcomes, all of those things were issues that bubbled up in our examination of what was happening. So this is all very familiar, and I will tell you from my perspective also rather doable. So that's the good news. So thinking about that then, what is one existing pattern at your school? And the way I'll frame this is that as you think about patterns, it doesn't have to be something big and enormous. Sometimes a small push or shift in a pattern can result in much larger changes than you think that it might. So what's an existing pattern in your school that maybe if altered might begin to shift that culture in the direction that you were talking about in question 1? Please type your responses. Great. Don't stop typing if you're still typing. We want to get those responses in. But definitely some good and interesting thoughts that I think some of what we're going to talk about today, we can help you with this. Certainly consistent paid time for collaboration is something that we're going to talk about. And having regular team meetings is a critical part of moving forward into the PLC work. The micromanaging, we're also going to address a little bit from a couple of perspectives, because part of collaboration and working in a professional learning community is about letting go of that micromanaging. And so at least some of this kind of can give you a system and a process to begin to do that, or to help your staff do that. And norming instructional practices, that's huge, and that has been one of the outcomes that we've begun to see. So I'll definitely try to share some of that with you. And getting everybody on board with that overall school picture, that's huge. And for us, doing the strategic planning and having so many people involved with that was the beginning of what got us moving in the direction of pulling people out of their own worlds and really beginning to look at the overall school picture. But additionally, as we moved into our PLC structure, we were able to do a lot more of that. So thank you very much for those great responses. Just to share briefly with you some of the patterns that we worked on and changed. One of the things was the fact that we spent a lot of time talking about teaching instead of learning. And so we really began to intentionally work on our language across the school and reminding each other as someone would start to talk about teaching or instruction, that we would push the idea of what impact does that have on learning? What about learning? What does that mean for learning? And so just that language shift, although artificial in the beginning, began to push people to really think differently around that. We also, some of you expressed some concerns kind of about how communication happens and so forth. We decided to really change our meeting patterns and to move toward group set agendas, to identifying action items and who's responsible and deadlines as we addressed every item at our meetings. We would end with, okay, what's the action item and who's going to do it? We really changed our decision-making patterns. We worked hard to be transparent on what decisions were administrative and what decisions were distributive, so that as we worked toward collaboration and consensus, people didn't feel like, yeah, they talk about collaboration and then they make decisions about this or that. And we all know there are decisions that have to be made administratively. And so it was really important that we were clear on these are administrative decisions and here's the reason why, and these are collaborative decisions and here's the reason why. So really trying to take an approach that that was clear and transparent for everybody. If you have questions that come up along the way, I just want to remind everyone that you can always use the chat area down in the corner to note your questions, and if I don't answer them right away, I will get to them eventually. So please remember that you can take advantage of that. So the first piece that we began to address after our strategic planning was really being very intentional about developing a culture of collaboration. We got a taste of collaboration in our strategic planning, and we really realized how critical that was to moving us forward in the direction we wanted to go in. And I don't know if it was luck or chance or karma or what, but the cards happened to align for us. And just after we had completed our strategic plan and we were beginning to work on those action plans, we had the good fortune as a part of being a part of the CalPro Professional Development Program. We were a professional development center at that time. And as a part of our contract, we were able to sponsor a local regional professional learning communities workshop, and we brought in a consultant from Solution Tree to actually deliver that workshop. We had a lot of Bay Area schools participate. I think even a few of you who are with us today were a part of that workshop that was held here in New Haven. We had consultants from CDE. We had people from CalPro all attend this. It was a day-long kind of introductions to professional learning communities workshop. And so for us, we had the good fortune of being able to cancel classes, and we sent all of our instructors to that training. And that really helped kind of get us off the ground with having a common understanding of what professional learning communities were and getting that common language going. But it was really critical after that as an administrator and with my leadership team to think about, okay, so now what do we do to keep the momentum of this workshop going? Because we all know a workshop doesn't do it. So we really started to think about, if we really want to embed that culture of collaboration, what are the things that we need to do to keep it going? And so I've got here on the slide a few of the critical components that we kind of figured out, some in the beginning and some along the way. One was making sure that the people who were going to lead our collaborative teams had skills in facilitating. Made a big difference for them. We took them through a local facilitation training, and it made a big difference for them to know how to handle the fact that we were going to have some people who wanted to be there, some people who didn't, some people who agreed, some people who disagreed. And so we really tried to give them some of those skills on how to facilitate a group. Another important piece for us, and this I think addresses a concern that somebody had brought up in the questions a few minutes ago, was the inclusion of all staff, and that included classified. When we set up our professional learning communities, we did it. We included a specific group for office and classified staff, and initially we even included custodial staff in that group. And our thinking on that was, if we were going to be serious about moving forward and working on the needs of our students, that had to be everybody's work. And what happens in the office, what happens in the hallways, all of that impacts whether or not the students' needs are met when they're at the school. So we had child care staff with a group, we had office staff with a group, and then we had all of the teaching staff involved. And an important part of my role as the administrator was to just be really clear that it was an expectation that everyone participate, that this was not something that was optional or elective, but it was a direction we were going in, and it was just part of being here at this school to participate. And of course, in order to do that, it had to be done during paid work time. And initially we thought that was going to be a huge challenge, but it really wasn't, because what we did was we realigned everything we were doing with professional learning communities, with supporting that effort. So all the money we'd been spending on other kinds of staff development was focused on supporting the professional learning communities and being able to offer paid work time to do that. We made sure that any decisions that we made were based on consensus, not majority. And that wasn't just in the collaborative groups. That was any decisions that were not administrative decisions we really worked on through consensus. And those decisions that were administrative, we worked on still using the same consensus model within our leadership teams. And the consensus model that we chose, and you can use any one, but I included it in the handouts that you'll get, is called Fist of Five. And it's just a really easy process to use where however many fingers you hold up basically tells how close you are to being able to live with the decision. And it has really helped us to make sure that those quiet, kind of silent dissenters have an opportunity to have voice, and then we hold them accountable. If they say they can live with a decision, then they're accountable for supporting that decision. So that was a real shift in how things happened around here. We had formerly had a number of issues with people who would stay quiet in meetings and then kind of work behind the scenes to counter what we were trying to do. And so we worked hard to really eliminate that kind of thinking. And with that came distributive leadership across the board. The facilitators of the collaborative groups really became leaders of a sense in each of their program areas. We really tried to hand out as much of the ownership and the leadership as possible to other people. And simply by using consensus as a decision-making tool really changes how people own what's happening. And so my intent through this whole thing was not to, as an administrator, was not to lead people kind of step and line and step, I think is the term, through a process, but to hand over as much of the ownership and autonomy as possible with that. Another piece, and this is probably where a lot of important work came in, was really looking at how to sustain that implementation no matter what. I'm sure many of you are in the same boat that I'm in, with school budgets being slashed and burned, and we have actually suffered about a 70% reduction in our budget at my school. We are now very small and very tight, and we made so much progress over the last few years on the work that we were doing that we just weren't willing to walk away from it or to give up on it. And so we really had to think about, how do we keep this moving? When we moved into the mode of being a professional learning community school, we absolutely made sure that all of our resources were aligned with the work of the PLCs. And if you think about that, it actually makes a lot of sense, because what is the work of the PLCs? It's the best instruction and the best learning for the students. So if all of your resources are aligned with the work of the PLC, it means all your resources are aligned with meeting the needs of your students. And so we really took a good hard look at what we were doing, and if it wasn't supporting meeting the learning needs of the students, then we weren't going to pay for it. And it shifted a lot of thinking and a lot of practices that were just kind of habitual practices in terms of alignment of resources. So what we did as our budget got cut, in order to sustain the meeting time for professional learning communities, is we decided we were going to cancel class one day a month in order to avoid having any extra expense. And it also helped with making sure that the staff were available because it was during their regular teaching time. So we canceled class one day a month in order to continue to hold those professional learning community meetings. I want to talk a little bit about focus and how it relates to school-wide implementation. In the resources that you'll get at the end of this, I mentioned a book by Mike Schmoker called Focus. And it's a book that I just got recently, and it was really exciting for me to see how much it aligned with kind of the philosophy that we have developed here. One of the things that we've done is to really adopt what I like to call a relentless focus on meeting the needs of our students and on supporting good teaching. That relentless focus has helped so much through these difficult budget times, because as we had to decide what staff got laid off, what programs got cut, how we trimmed back the budget, we really fell back on this focus. Every decision we made, we asked ourselves, what's the impact on student learning? What's the impact on student learning? What's the impact on student learning? And what I found was that it really took a lot of the emotion for everybody out of those difficult budget decisions, because there wasn't anybody at the school that didn't agree with and weren't committed to the idea that we need to meet the needs of the students. And it was really my role as the administrator here to keep championing that focus, that clear focus. And in Mike Schmoker's book, he talks about how important it is to focus on, to keep things simple, basically, is what he talks about. Simplicity, clarity, and priority. And he contends that what we teach, how we teach it, and then actually infusing authentic literacy into that. And by authentic literacy, he talks about reading, writing, and talking about the content, that those three things, focusing on a good coherent curriculum, on structurally sound lessons, and on reading, writing, and talking about the content, will make a bigger difference in student learning than all other initiatives combined. And that really is a great description of kind of how we hunkered down and refocused through our professional learning communities. We really started kind of quelling everything down to the most basic things that had to survive in order to continue to meet the needs of the students. And again, our school-wide philosophy is that student learning is everyone's work. So the classified staff in the office absolutely know what it is we're focusing on in the classrooms and are a part of the process with all of that. A very important piece is the accountability for results. Our philosophy is that if the results aren't tangible, then we haven't really accomplished anything. And this is connected to the idea of focusing on learning rather than teaching. I'm sure you have all heard people say, heard teachers say, I taught it, they just didn't learn it. Well, that's great. It's great if you teach it, but if the students don't learn it, what's the point? Have we really accomplished anything? And I always tell our teachers, you can be a wonderful teacher, but if the students aren't learning, then you're not successful, and we need to step back and look at what we need to shift to be successful. So we have placed a heavy emphasis on accountability and results. And initially, that made a lot of people uncomfortable. But what we've tried to help the staff understand is that that doesn't have to be evaluative. It simply means that we all have a responsibility. And part of the way we approach that is also giving the staff some input on what our administrative accountability was for the work in the professional learning communities. So we did some training and some work around really discussing all of our accountability roles in making sure that the professional learning community work resulted in something tangible. So some of the results that we have focused on here are, the first one is common agreements, and I'm sure you're wondering what the heck is a common agreement. What we did was we talked through in our professional learning communities about what work had we done and what impact was it having on the classroom. And we came to a common agreement that at a minimum, we should be able to see certain things in every classroom based on the research we had read, based on the work we had done together, that there were things that we should be able to see happening in the classrooms. And those things were, we quelled it down to 3 things that we were committing to for our students. One was that every lesson would have a specified learning objective. The next was that all lessons would include multiple checks for understanding. And the third was that every lesson would include one of the following methods for evaluating the learning objective: either a classroom formative assessment, a common formative assessment, or a summative assessment. So our common agreements were around good specific learning objectives, checking for understanding, and either formative or summative assessment. And we set up a pretty interesting and elaborate structure for doing classroom walkthroughs to verify that and to give teachers feedback on how that was working. Initially, we did those walkthroughs just as a leadership team and administrators, and the way we would keep it from being evaluative was we would collect the data by number of classrooms. So for example, in 7 out of 10 classrooms, we saw a learning objective posted on the wall. In 8 out of 10 classrooms, we saw students engaged in work connected to the learning objective. So nobody got specific feedback about their individual class, but we published in our staff room the walkthrough data about the whole school so that we could see as a whole group what we were working on and what progress we were making. And it really started some great conversations going in the staff rooms and so forth. Also focusing on student surveys and student feedback. It was really important to us that the students know what they were learning. So we did a lot of journaling and surveys around what are you learning and how do you know what your progress is, all connected back to those common agreements around learning objectives and assessment. And then our instructional leadership team, we developed an instructional leadership team with representatives from each of the collaborative groups that meets monthly to really plan for what's the next step in terms of where we're going and what's the accountability piece that goes with it. So what I want you to do now is to think about what tangible results are you looking for from PLC implementation, and we have a poll here that you can respond to, and if items 1 through 8 don't match what you're thinking of in terms of tangible results, then you can use the chat pod to describe any other tangible results that you're looking for. So please respond. Okay. Oh, I see a few people would like to pick all of them. That's good. Bold, but good. So it looks like we have a lot of people who are interested in increased persistence. That was definitely one of the goals that we worked on. And what we found was the clearer we were with students about what they were learning and how they were doing with that learning and sharing those assessment results with them, the better the persistence got, because they really were connected to their learning. Obviously, increase in standardized tests, that's critical to all of us because that means money. So again, a good focus. And definitely transition, looking at those transition pieces. So let's see. I'm just looking in the chat pod to see if there's any that that I missed. Good. Okay. So moving forward, the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about in terms of professional learning communities and supporting them as an administrator is the idea of embedded staff development. One of the things that we had to really be clear with our staff about was that this wasn't one more thing, that it was really a way of shifting how we did staff development. And so our staff development now, after years of working on this and really kind of refining and getting better, is really directly connected to the professional learning community work. The professional learning community collaborative groups decide what they need in real time as it comes up in the work that they're doing around good lesson plans and learning objectives and formative and summative assessments, and then we provide it. So if I'm trying to think, recently an issue came up around how to do backwards design in order to support the creation of good learning objectives. And so we did a couple of workshops during their collaboration time explicitly addressing those issues. But the other thing that we do with that embedded staff development is we model the teaching techniques and the lesson planning and the clear learning objectives and checking for understanding that we want them to do when we do those embedded workshops. So it provides kind of a twofold staff development, because they're getting the specific information that they're needing or wanting, and at the same time we're modeling what it is we want them to be doing. Our leadership team, our instructional leadership team, is responsible for identifying the research on best practices and bringing it to the table. So we are constantly bringing forward journal articles or new books, or maybe chapters in new books to share with folks that have the research and best practices on whatever topic it is that the collaborative teams are working on. So in that way, it really, the staff development doesn't become a separate piece, but it's really embedded, and we call it learning by doing, because they're learning it, they're trying it, they're using it, they're coming back, they're identifying the next piece they need to learn, and it really becomes a real-time staff development. And our school actually went through WASC accreditation for the first time. We had our initial a few years ago, and then we had our first really full accreditation last year. And it was amazing, because I've been through WASC accreditation before, and Christine, who's in the audience, is probably chuckling because she and I did it together at my previous school, where it was just so much extra work. And what we were able to do was really embed the WASC self-study work right in the PLC collaborative work. And it really did not turn out to be very much extra work at all, because it was directly connected to identifying all that stuff about what do we want our students to learn, and how will we know when they've learned it, and what do we do when they don't. That embedded staff development really has been beneficial in terms of resources, and it's been beneficial in terms of the usefulness of our staff development. And the result is, instead of a few people attending staff development time, we have 100% participation, and the focus is directly connected to the needs of the students every time. So that kind of is a huge thing for us. So thinking about kind of what have we learned along the way, and we have learned so much. One of the things that kind of a side piece that I wanted to emphasize as the administrator is that as the administrator, I think the staff, when we first started this, thought that I had an end product in mind. And often were coming to me asking, just tell us what you want us to do and we'll do it. Just tell us what you want this to look like and we'll do it. And so it took a lot to convince them that I didn't have an end product in mind. Kind of the whole idea behind professional learning communities is you don't know what the outcome is going to be, because it's that collaborative learning together piece that's so important. And so part of my work as an administrator was not defining it too clearly for the staff, but letting them fiddle with it and work with it and play with it and learn from it, and kind of letting it be organic to a certain degree. And so the kind of the end result lesson learned on that is collaboration is really hard work. And sometimes it's work that really bogs down, and it feels like you're trying to walk in thick mud and, you know, make your way through. At the beginning in my fairy tale, I talked about a thick forest of inquiry. It really is a thick forest. It's not easy work and it's not fast work, but it's so much more meaningful for changing practice in the classroom. I just have really been, as I step back and think about what we've accomplished, I'm just amazed at how much progress we've made on some of those things that you all brought up at the beginning, on teachers having a more common practice from one classroom to the next. Something I forgot to mention earlier, I started to talk about walkthroughs, and then I think I got on another train of thought. We started the walkthroughs with administrators walking through and collecting that data, but we quickly discovered that the teachers really needed to be a part of the walkthroughs as well. So we now use what we call a rolling walkthrough schedule, so that every teacher gets to come out of their classroom for an hour. We just do them once a term because it takes a lot of planning, but they come out of their classroom for an hour and join walkthroughs of other classrooms and the collection of that data, so that everybody gets the experience of seeing classes from another perspective. Anyway, back to our lessons learned. You really have to become comfortable with the learning by doing and the slow messiness of that. And as an administrator, you have to kind of pull yourself out of that sticky, messy mud and just be the cheerleader and the champion, and keep letting everybody know this is good work, this is the right work, this is the direction we need to be going in. No, it's not going to go away, so you can stop resisting and get on board, because we're going to stay with this through thick and thin no matter what. That's been my message to everybody. The students' needs are going to stay at the center of what we're doing, and we're going to continue to do this work to make sure we're meeting the student needs. So it really is about staying the course, and I will tell you the results are worth staying the course. And make sure that you celebrate the progress along the way and be patient. We have a couple of teachers who, after, I think we're in our 4th year of this, who just now are getting on board finally. So there's a lot to benefit the school, the teachers, the students, but it's definitely hard work, and you got to stay the course. I did provide here some resources that hopefully will help you. All Things PLC website. If you haven't been on there, definitely go on there and check it out. It's got some wonderful stuff. And a lot of helpful forms and suggestions and ideas. It's really great. And then I've included a few books here. Learning by Doing is a great hands-on book to really guide you through the work of kind of the in and out of classroom parts of professional learning communities. Also, Best Practices for Enhancing Student Achievement, Professional Learning Communities at Work is a great book to do the same thing. And Team to Teach, a Facilitator's Guide to Professional Learning Teams. Again, that facilitator piece and those facilitator skills are really very important. So I just wanted to get on to questions. Anybody have questions that I haven't answered? I feel like I had so much to cover in so little time, so I'm sorry if it felt like it was rushed. I could probably talk all day about this stuff. So any questions that I can answer? Okay, I'll start with PLC meetings. Initially, our PLC meetings were facilitated by teachers, which I really felt was ideal, especially once they were trained in facilitation skills. We had to shift to program managers. We don't have administrators facilitate any of them, but we do have program managers facilitating now, and that was only because we could not afford the extra time that we needed to pay the teachers in order to do the planning that comes with facilitating those meetings. So we had to shift last year over to having the program managers take on that role so that they could embed that planning time in their regular work hours. We did not do we didn't do day and evening separate collaborative team meetings. Each program area had a team meeting, and that program area decided collectively on the time they wanted to meet. So for a while, because we had both day and evening ESL teachers, they would meet in the afternoon, because that kind of split the difference between day and evening. But we definitely asked that the programs stay together and find a time that worked for them to be able to stay together. And when that time was split between day and evening, they really they made it work. I think we had one teacher who absolutely couldn't do it, and they found a way to include her by phone. So let me see. A copy of the PowerPoint, that's probably
we will have a copy of the
question.
PowerPoint available. And in fact, Nancy, I'm going to move us on to our final part of the webinar, if that's okay. All right. I want to again,
Sure.
just in honoring the time commitment that we've asked for the participants, thank you for your time and participation in our webinar. Nancy, you did a great job in sharing the PLC perspective and program development from your program. It really, really gave us a great idea of how we can try and implement similar efforts in our site. The pods that you have before you now have the downloads from today's presentation. Nancy was gracious to put together a number of handouts and tools and materials for you. And if you see things that you like that she's put there in that second pod, just go ahead and highlight it and then click upload file and then save it to your computer. When you click on it, click save to your computer and you will be able to just save it right there. There's also at the top pod a survey for you to complete on your participation in the webinar. We would also love to get your feedback on the webinar. And I just wanted to give you information on our next upcoming webinar, which will be on February the 29th, and it will be on the Title IV Financial Aid Accreditation and the Council of Occupational Education process, so the COE process. I look forward to your joining us during that webinar. We will keep this classroom open just for a few minutes, so that, again, if you would like to download any of the materials, you can. And also know that this webinar, as all of our webinars, was recorded, and you can go back and re-listen to it or share it with your colleagues at a future date. Thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to having you participate in future webinars. Thanks so much.